Hi everybody. Mindful movement is one of my biggest passions in life. As a little kid, I grew up on a farm and I spent the majority of my time outside playing, whether it was by myself, in nature, in the barns with our pigs, out in the field, cornfields, sugar beet fields, etc., with my dogs, or with my brother and my friends and cousins. I loved to play, I loved to explore, I loved to move. And I feel like so much of what I did growing up revolved around movement with my parents, with my extended family, etc. Just every single one of my favorite movements or my favorite memories has to do with movement. When I got a little older into middle school, I had never played sports. I didn't play rec league or anything when I was a little kid. But when I got into middle school, I started getting into sports. And of course, in elementary and middle school, being introduced to physical education. And this was an interesting and important phase in my life because I went from a little kid who loved play to a young student who really dreaded physical education. There were days that it was fun. Some of the games we played were great, but starting to learn about the differences between my body and other people's bodies, and the way that a lot of activities are set up is for a certain kind of body. So when I was in high school, I had two teachers. They were teachers, coaches, and mentors, two women specifically, that invited me to go to a yoga class with them, and I had never done yoga before. But it was the winter of my junior year of high school. I felt a little bit burned out from being involved in sports and training year-round. I mean, I would be in the gym as a high schooler 3 or 4 times a day for different training sessions. So this winter, I took off from everything and all I did was yoga and competitive weightlifting. So it was a winter of exploring new kinds of movement and individual movement that was all about making me better rather than team sports and having to compete for things. So my first yoga class that I ever went to was with Miss Alstrom and Miss Svoboda Ojeda. So my FIAD teacher and my Spanish teacher, like I said, both of whom were also coaches and mentors of mine. But I went to this yoga class. I'd never experienced yoga before, so I thought, kind of like most Americans, yoga is, all about like fold up into these crazy postures and see how flexible you can be compared to someone else. And what I realized with my teacher, our teacher, Mary Beth Neal from the Yoga Loft, is that yoga is so much more. There's such a deeper meaning and a deeper importance for this kind of movement. And as a high schooler, I went to this first session of yoga and I stuck with it for a few more weeks until I started a new season of athletics. But it was 6 weeks of transforming my perspective and my understanding of how movement could feel and how movement could heal my body. Remembering, of course, that I came from the background of competition, a background of intense, really, really lengthy workouts, and everything was about training to be an athlete. So I think this was my first step into training for life. That's what this first experience in yoga was for me. And when I went from high school into college, long story short, I had some really impactful professors that I met who convinced me to become a teacher. Physical education, health education, and developmental adapted physical education with a coaching minor. So I had a double major, double minor when I had graduated with my bachelor's. And this very, very deep passion and commitment to change what physical education, health education, and movement is about to the world. And what I mean by that is thinking back on your memories of physical education growing up or health education. What are some of the most profound memories that come up? Usually when I ask this to people, they think about sports that followed the seasons. So in the fall we played flag football, in the winter we played basketball, and in the spring we played softball. Or people think about games like dodgeball, also with names like murder ball or other crazy names. And I made a commitment to myself with some of my professors and other students that I went through undergrad with that if we were really going to be good teachers, we didn't bring things like dodgeball to our classes. We didn't teach based on the season of athletics in the state high school league. We didn't teach based on the things that we had experienced growing up in physical education or health education, unless they were individualized and transformative. So, long story short, again, taking all of this context, bringing it to what I really want to get to today, which is the idea of mindful movement and the idea of moving meditations. Because I've had so much experience and impact and training with how to transform the body, how to heal the body, how to make it stronger, how to make it more mobile, how to move in functional ways, how to train as an athlete, how to train as a woman, how to train as a man, right? Setting course for whatever it is that you want to achieve in your life and training for that specific purpose. All the while really focusing on the essence of the movement that will take you down the pathway to get to that place. As an example, training as a high school athlete to become an elite athlete requires certain kinds of conditioning, certain kinds of weight training, certain kinds of agility training, certain days of the week for certain periods of time, certain repetitions, and a specific kind of quality to each of those movements, right? As a competitive high school athlete, that's very, very different than a young woman training to be herself. So, two examples that are very personal to me, of course, but you see the difference. Now, as an adult woman, I'm not training to be a competitive athlete anymore. Therefore, I don't need to be in the gym 3 times a week, or 3 times a day, doing all these different kinds of athlete-based workouts. My job is to intuitively listen to what my body needs. I have, of course, programs set up for myself, but it's not so rigid because I don't have periodization that I need to work on. I don't need to get from point A to point B within 6 weeks to make sure that I have peak physical performance for a physical objective at the end of that time period. So when I talk about mindful movement, when I talk about moving meditations, it's more about understanding the terrains of my inner world, understanding the landscape of my mind, and how that influences and impacts my body. At the same time, knowing how my body is impacting my mind, and more importantly, how the environment, the context, the culture around me is influencing the expression both of my inner landscape, my terrains, and my physicality or my hologram. So in my YouTube channel here, part of what I'm going to begin teaching is mindful movement and moving meditations. You notice that some of my other videos are really focused on womanhood. So I'm going to begin to converge the idea of systems change and womanhood, or the essence of your being, into one channel here, one category of videos that's going to be all about mindful movement. So I'm going to take one movement per video, break it down for you, look at the technical aspects of it, reflect a little bit on when you might use this, what's the biosymbolism or the biosemiotics of that movement, how might I apply it to my daily life, or how might I apply it to my movement rituals beyond a routine. And if I'm experiencing pain, discomfort, distraction during that movement, how can I go into it, pull out the trauma or the embodied stress that I carry with that movement? What does it mean? We pull that inside out. We start to actually dissect it or analyze it. First by doing procedural movement, which means just big body, mechanical. How do we get from point A with our arms down to point B with our arms up overhead? Something simple like that. How do I bring my arms from point A to point B? Point A to point B. When we slow it down after procedural, we go into something called proprioceptive learning. So we're going to take it nice and slow. We close the eyes to go inward. We pinpoint where the tension and discomfort stands out, where we feel like we need to fall out of the movement or the posture. And then we start to do some biocognitive techniques and biocognitive questioning, biocognitive meaning mind-body science. And we look at what it is that we're holding on to epigenetically transferred or from our own lifetime. What are the things that we hold on to in our muscles, our bones, inside of our body? And how do we start to create new neural maps through the rituals and the movements of our daily life? So I want to invite you on this journey with me, remembering that movement doesn't have to be punishing. Movement doesn't have to be painful. Instead, movement should be simple, movement should be honoring, and movement should be an expression of self-love, of self-caring commitments that you have. So to all of the people who are out there in need of this kind of a message and in need of this kind of movement, you have permission, you have space, and you have guidance on how to get back into your body, how to better bring cohesion to your mind and body, and how to explore and really nurture your self-worth and your essence. So I'm excited to see you at some of my next sessions of mindful movement and moving meditations. Thank you for joining me today.